Hello and welcome back to Jardin du Mayfair. Today we're doing a first Panerai unboxing. I'm really excited for it. Let's have a look at the Panerai Submersible Quattro CarboTech Blue Abysso, model number PAM 01232. I want to take a quick moment to say, please do like, comment, share and subscribe. We have up to 90% of our viewers not subscribed at the moment and we need to work on that. Okay, so firstly, straight away, this box is beautiful. I love the effort that Panerai have put in here. It's got this lovely indented Panerai logo there and it's just really a nice thing. Let's get it open and have a look inside. Okay, so this is really cool. It comes with 2 extra straps to make a 3 in total, and you also get this lovely posh screwdriver tool to change the straps. We'll have a look at those later, but let's get to the meat and potatoes. Panerai, Panerai, Panerai. A brand that has had more ups and downs than a heart rate monitor, some of which have been scandalous, but whose watches remain firm favourites with many collectors due to their instantly identifiable designs. I'll get this bit out of the way early doors. I'm a Paneristi. The style of both the Radiamer and Luminor are right up my alley. As a consummate changer of straps, the sheer number of quality of aftermarket offerings mean that you'll never get bored. As much as we all know I'm into Rolex and AP amongst others, I often feel like a collection is missing something when there isn't a PAM amongst the troops. That said, I'm not a huge fan of the brand as a whole, and I'm going to be honest about that from the outset, because I believe that when reviewing and discussing watches, if you gloss over all the negatives, you can't really be trusted when you're being positive. I think when you get to present Panerai, an example being this CarboTech Submersible that I'm busy fondling, we need to take a look back over the years. So let's go back to the beginning. Panerai first began in 1860 when Giovanni Panerai opened his watchmaking shop on Ponte alle Grazie. That was in Florence in Italy, where he sold and serviced quality pocket watches and established a watchmaking school. By the end of the 1800s, Giovanni's son, Leon Francesco, had become involved in a business which had expanded and was now fabricating parts and tools for the Swiss as well as selling their timepieces. Crucially, the Swiss were also applying father and son with parts such as cases, movements, and that would be something that would become useful in the later years. Leon's son Guido joined the business in the early 20th century, and under his guidance, Panerai diversified into mechanical engineering and instrument design, supplying items such as wearable depth gauges, timing and contact triggers for mines and submersible navigation tools for the Italian Navy, the Regia Marina. In 1914, Guido began adding luminous markings to his military equipment, made from a paste which used the highly glowing and equally toxic radium. Panerai used it to create night sights on guns and named it Radiamer, which is a combination of radio, Italian for radium, and Maya, which means sight, as in night sight. It was patented in 1916. But the patent refers to the glowing gun sights and not the creation of radium, the compound that is often claimed. In 1936, Panerai received a request from the Regia Marina to build watches for their divers which were visible in the low-light conditions of the waters in which they were used. They needed to be big, legible and tough. Although they were highly adept at creating military equipment, watches were to be a step into the unknown, so Panerai turned to one of the established Swiss companies known for their expertise in waterproof watches. Dum dum dum, it was Rolex. The first Panerai dive watch, the Radiamer, was made by soldering wires onto the case of a Rolex pocket watch. They utilised the movement within it while adding what would become the trademark luminous dial. So the first Panerai reference, 2533, was a prototype made in 1936. Panerai and Rolex continued to make radium watches for the Italian Navy, and they began to introduce different dial variations, such as the California dial, which was a mix of Arabic and Roman numerals. The watch has become a bit of a legend. Panerai began to hone their dial manufacture, and they were using two overlapping dial sheets, one which was coated in radium sat below a black dial which contained cutout markers with the luminescence glowing through. These are known as sandwich dials, and they are my favourite. By the 1940s, production was going well, and the Italian Navy requested improved specifications as their watches were spending more and more time underwater. They wanted pieces which were even more resistant to the tension and flex of heavy underwater use, and considered that the wire lugs on the current radiomers were a weak point. This was an issue that they wanted resolved. Panerai's solution to this was to reshape the case to incorporate horn-style lugs rather than the traditional soldered wires. This evolution became known as the 40s case. On a quick side note here, the OG radiomer wire lugs were actually as strong as an ox. But throughout World War II, Panerai watches and instruments were seeing a lot of use from the Italian Navy. There is a mystery which has not yet been resolved, confirmed or denied surrounding World War II Panerai. We know that they were made for and used by the Italian Navy, but we do not know why so many unbranded Panerai began appearing on the wrists of German Kampfschwimmers. They could have been supplied by either Panerai themselves or the Italians. It is unlikely that this will ever be known. However, we do know they were definitely worn in number by the German divers, as well as the Regia Marina. What can be said with some degree of confidence is that Rolex would have been unaware of this situation, as they were watchmaking for the Allies and considered themselves to have a special relationship with Britain, having been founded there in 1905. So in 1949, as the risks and radioactivity of radium was becoming highly publicised, Panerai switched to a new hydrogen isotope-based compound that they trademarked in 1949 as Luminor. Panerai used this name when they released a new line of watches featuring a crown locking mechanism. The patented Panerai crown guard has become synonymous with the brand and is still used by them today. It exists to protect the winding crown in two ways. Firstly, the crescent moon surrounding the crown protects against knocks and accidental damage. And the locking lever, which is raised when winding and closed to seal. This pushes the crown into the case and makes a snug gasket fit, which creates a watertight seal when the lever is closed. Since Panerai were producing hand winders, preserving the life of the crown was very important. In 1954, Rolex issued an edict regarding ongoing collaborations with Panerai, likely due to the volume of watches that ended up in the hands of the Germans during World War II. So this instruction coincided with Panerai being commissioned to supply equipment to the Egyptian Navy and being asked to create and supply a diving watch just as the Suez tensions erupted and Egypt were becoming an emerging military power in the Middle East. Panerai had to engineer their own case and use a non-Rolex movement or risk falling foul of the agreement. So that is exactly what they did. And instead of using Rolex supplied cases and movements, they used their wrist-mounted compasses and depth gauges as a muse instead. This led to the creation of the Egiziano Grosso, translated Big Egyptian. It was a 60mm sized beast with a rotating bezel and an 8-day Angelus movement. The Big Egyptian was a truly transitional model for Panerai, as it marked both their move away from Rolex and the beginning of their twilight years as a supplier of tactical watches to the military, as the world was beginning an era of relative peace. The company's instrument manufacturer entered a period of decline until 1972. That year, Giuseppe Panerai, who was Guido's son overseeing watch production and manufacture, died, and for the first time Panerai was managed by former Italian naval officer and non-family figurehead Dino Zay. Under Zay, Panerai's watchmaking activities were suspended until the early 1990s as the company concentrated on the continuing manufacture of aerospace components, dive tools and tactical equipment. Now the 90s would change Panerai's fortunes. The watch world was beginning to take a more than passing interest in mechanical watches again, and notably Rolex was riding its very own high on its wave of dive watches for consumers with the Submariner and Sea Dweller lines. Not to mention IWC with its pilot watches and the emerging popular theme of tough mechanical watches with military history. So this is the part where I'm supposed to tell you that one fine day in Rome in 1995, as he was preparing to shoot the Daylight movie, Sylvester Stallone was having a lovely walk in the cool breeze under the warm skies and just happened to see a watch, a Panerai, in a store window, and that it was an instant love affair of his. He adored the watch, bought it instantly and wore it while filming. He then bought more Panerais and gifted them to his equally muscled friends, Arnie and Bruce. And the brand launched into the stratosphere, all because that one fateful day of window shopping in Italy, Sly would pick up his new favourite piece. I'm not going to tell you all that because it's absolute. It's actually a false history contrived by the Richemont Group, or Vendôme as they were known when they purchased Panerai for a mere $1.5 million. Stallone was wearing a Panerai in 1994, a year before he signed up for the Daylight film. The real story is much less dramatic, I'm afraid, and it involves a photographer and lover of all things sartorial and luxurious, Monty Shadow. Monty got into Panerai in 1992, having read a huge article about Panerai and their history in a Japanese magazine called World Wristwatch. It was this article and the subsequent interest from Japanese enthusiasts that pushed Panerai to carve themselves a niche in this emerging market. So they duly set about raiding their previous watches and prototypes with a view to selling to the public rather than the military. Shadow, who was a resident in Italy, bought the newly released Luminor and said of it, "I liked it because it was simple, clean, and I wore it all the time." Monty knew that Panerai had the potential to be big, so took himself and his Luminor off to Hollywood to do some hobnobbing. He introduced the watch to Sylvester Stallone and told him all about the history of Panerai. Sly was totally hooked. They had achieved liftoff, and they even named the watches after the man who helped it happen, with the Panerai SlyTech. The brand had been successfully resuscitated and was gathering fans across the world because the watches were really, really cool and completely different from other offerings. They had a dedicated fan base who were nicknamed the Paneristi. They collected their watches, straps and absolutely anything else Panerai related. Panerai were genuinely booming for a good few years and were set up to be on the up and away. So we could forgive Richemont a little bit on the manipulation front if that was the only little issue to have ever plagued the brand. But unfortunately it wasn't. Worse things have happened at sea, the most notable of which was the Brooklyn Bridge scandal, which drove fans of the brand up the wall and tanked their reputation. The Panerai Brooklyn Bridge was a 150-piece limited edition released in 2009, which featured the bridge engraved on its caseback. The edition sold like the proverbial hotcakes to fans, but it was only when one opened up the caseback that it was discovered that Panerai had slung in a poorly finished, undecorated, low-end Unitas movement and hidden it with the engraved rear. Panerai were not using manufacture movements at the time anyway. They were always using Unitas, but in their mainstream models, the movements were nicely finished, decorated, and bothered about. The raw bead, blasted and completely unfinished lump that was in the Brooklyn Bridge led collectors to claim that Panerai were both capitalising and taking the biscuit out of their loyal fans by selling them limited glittering editions powered by shit because they thought nobody would see it or care. You shouldn't do that to your customers, and the reputation of the brand took a Mariana Trench level dive. In 2017, Shadow reached out to Stallone, who is undeniably one of the architects of the brand's success. This was with a view of reviving his relationship with Panerai, and was met with an utterly curt response, which can be boiled down to, "What have Panerai ever done for me? I can even get a discount at Cartier, another Richmond brand. I helped them become $1 billion company, and for that I have been ignored. Did they make me a brand ambassador? No. I haven't even been treated with any respect. Sly's revival was refused. Ouch." Popularity went from bad to worse as Panerai introduced snapbacks and spring bars on their base models. This was to cut production costs as opposed to the traditional screws. Bad form given that the watches were still in the 5K arena. Then they quietly removed hacking seconds from their 9010 movement. And yet again, for confidently declaring that their P9200 movement was in-house without bothering to remove the 2982A2 engraving from its base plate, an engraving which appeared on the movement because it was an externally sourced ETA. These misdeeds were all highlighted by Periscope and swiftly set fire to the internet. Now, I want you to know I don't have an issue with externally sourced movements. In my book, it means that they can be serviced and maintained by independents, which is always a good thing. But what I do have an issue with is dishonesty and sneaky downgrades. Throughout the life of the brand under Richmond Group, this is something that Panerai have been caught out with time and time again. So, given that this review is turning out to be a bit of a moan and a bit too much history, what is it that Panerai gets so right? Because their wrongs are overlooked, and post-slump their sales are on the rise once again. For all of their flaws of their parent company, there's nothing else on the market that looks and feels like a Panerai. You really have got to have something special in able to avoid tanking yourself. And genuinely, despite all of their wrongdoing over the years, Panerai are still one of my favourite watch brands. The simplicity and absolute legibility of the dials, the standard oversized cases which are just so comfortable, and the ability to change and look around with different straps make them a joy to own and wear. Now, I appreciate they're not to everyone's taste, but what is? Now, you guys know that I love big watches, but size issues have also been addressed, with smaller models reaching the market from the 38mm Dew models and 42 and 40mm submersibles, as well as the traditionally sized 44 and 47mm luminars and the 45 and 47mm radiumers. There is quite literally something for everyone's wrist these days. Another huge positive is Panerai have also pushed sustainability. They have worked to develop new materials with an eye for the environment, such as their new E-Steel, which is made from 95% recycled steel, collected largely from the Swiss watch industry, and it's a carbon and waste reducing effort. They are also using BMG, a substance with a disordered atomic structure, obtained through a high pressure injection process at a high temperature, followed by a cooling process lasting for only a few seconds. The end result is a material which is lighter, stronger, and more shock resistant than steel due to its arrangement of atoms. Along with case innovation, we're also seeing more and more straps as parts made from recycled materials, which is no doubt appealing to customers with an environmental conscience. Panerai have also started to invest in partnerships geared towards ocean preservation. They are working with UNESCO and Conservation International to support their work and raise awareness. So, now that we've done the good, the bad and the ugly of Panerai, we should probably get to this little cracker, the compactly named Panerai Submersible Quattro Blue Abysso, or the Blue Abyss as it translates to. This is a superb offering from the submersible line, which is made from a CarboTech, a trademarked composite based on carbon fibre. This is a superb offering from the submersible line. It's made from CarboTech, which is a trademarked composite based on carbon fibre and polyether. It has a wonderful matte black grained finish, which looks not too dissimilar to wood. It is light as hell, tough as boots, and resistant to corrosion. Another lovely thing is that no case has the same pattern due to the uneven nature of the composite. So each case is unique, and we all love a bit of that. This wears, as they all do, really well for a 44mm watch, thanks to the short lugs and 50 style cushion case. I tire of pointing out that it's actually lug length rather than watch diameter that can push a watch into the nope, it's too big range. Panerai are thankfully broad but squat, which keeps the size perfectly manageable. The dial, as it says on the tin, representative of a blue abyss, finished in a rich dark blue colour, which takes on an almost violet tint, which works well against the black charcoal case. It's typically ultra legible with bright white hour markers and hands, and has been generously applied with Luminova. Panerais are like torches. When you light them up, it's a great thing to see, especially if you're going to head into water with them rather than the water cooler. As much as they're pretty, they still are tool watches. 300 meters of water resistance, thanks to the crown mechanism, which acts like a sealed plug, as well as existing to protect the crown from accidental disasters, and finished with an incredibly comfortable and supple rubber strap in matching abyss blue. Movement wise, I'm delighted to alleviate from any concern by informing you that this piece runs the Caliber P9000, which is nothing to be concerned about and is based on the Valfluria Ebauche. It's robust, reliable, and supplies a date along with 72 hours of power reserve. It's a very capable movement and can be serviced either through the manufacturer or an independent should you desire. The movement is hidden behind a black titanium caseback, but this is not a case of hiding anything unspeakable, but purely down to ensuring water resistance, as sapphire casebacks present more opportunity for weakened serials. All in all, this is an absolutely stonking piece from Panerai, and one that I'd happily recommend anyone add to their collection. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed our first ever Panerai video. I hope you've now got a good understanding of the brand if you didn't have already, and to all you Paneristi out there, let us know what you think. Please do like, comment, share, and most importantly, get yourself subscribed so I can keep this content coming.